Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1109, 1109, Tuesday, April the 21st, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, before I get started on some of the news bits of the day and almost all Spygate, Russiagate type stuff today, not too much in the way of politics, thank God, and no coronavirus. I just want to go ahead and get this off my chest. I continue to see these news stories talking about Trump-Russia collusion or Russia collusion in general in the 2016 election. Continue to see the dossier referred to as the Steele dossier. I just want to dispose of these two myths. Christopher Steele was not the author of the dossier. That is bullshit. Christopher Steele was not the author of the dossier. How do we know that? We know that because of Lee Smith's book, where in his book, he shows you 3 proto-dossiers. Now, there were 4 proto-dossiers, and he obtained 3 of these 4 from a journalist. He puts them in the book. These proto-dossiers are called proto-dossiers because they contain their memos, like the so-called Steele memos, that contain a lot of the very same information, the very same players. And these things were being circulated all over the District of Criminals, all over the metro area. All the D.C. metro sort of beltway news reporters were being passed these proto-dossiers. And the person who gave Lee Smith these dossiers said, hey, I acquired these around, early June. But some people may have been getting these things that were being circulated maybe even as early as sometime in May. So these proto-dossiers are out there long before the so-called Steele dossier ever shows up on the scene. Now the memos of it were being passed around beginning right around the 20th of July, and the FBI says that they didn't actually see the dossier till September of 2016. Mr. Potato Head, believe it or not, claims that he didn't see the dossier until December of 2016. Clearly lying. They're all lying. So there are a few items that you might find in the so-called Steele dossier where Steele copied and pasted a couple of things that he originally put into his report when he was working on the FIFA soccer scandal fiasco. But even then, when he put that information into his report for the FIFA soccer scandal, it was tossed into the trash can and referred to as just, not true. Not factual reporting. And they didn't even use any of the work that Steele did in the FIFA soccer scandal because they said it was mostly just a bunch of made-up garbage. And he lifted a couple of things with a couple of the players that you see in the later Steele dossier, and he kind of copied and pasted a couple items from that. But 95% of what's in the so-called Steele dossier was in these proto-dossiers, and they were being passed around long before Christopher Steele showed up on the scene with his first memo on June the 20th. So, and with all the other information that's come out, I think it's pretty clear that the dossier was most likely written by, if you want to know the true authors, Confusion GPS, who was contracted to put the so-called dossier together. And the sources for that were likely Simpson and his wife, Cody Shear and Sidney Blumenthal, Hillary Clinton's henchmen. And then, of course, we don't know to the extent who was feeding some of these so-called Russians, but they may have had some input, but the material they were putting into it was very likely, based on what we know now, very likely that information was given to them not by Russians or Russian intelligence or anyone in the Putin government, but likely from FBI or CIA informants. some of them named Stefan Halper. And I do hope that when we get to the bottom of this, that Durham will make this perfectly clear, and that this myth will be debunked, and we'll never have to hear the term Steele dossier ever again, because there was no Steele dossier. It's a myth. The other myth that continues to be bandied about is Russians meddling in the 2016 campaign. Where's the evidence? Uncle Bob the Executioner and the DOJ had to drop their case against the Russian trolls in Concord Management because they couldn't prove it. It was all cooked up. The black ledger that was used to launch the investigation into Manafort has been proven to be false. Papadopoulos, we can read from the statements, the exculpatory statements he made to both informants prove that he wasn't involved. We know that Carter Page wasn't involved in any Russian conspiracy. He was working for the government, helping them take down some Russian mobsters. There's really no evidence of the Russian government, Putin's government, being involved in the 2016 elections. The DNC hack wasn't a hack. I don't think anyone really believes that. We don't know for sure, but there's a lot better chance that it was an inside job at the DNC. Most likely it was Seth Rich, a disgruntled Bernie Sanders supporter, who provided that information to WikiLeaks, not the Russians. And the FBI never did an investigation into the Right Reverend Clinton's, the DNC server. And so, all they have is CrowdStrike, who was working for the Right Reverend Clinton campaign to push the narrative that was created back in 2015. There's no evidence of any Russians. There's no evidence that Steele was the author of the dossier. They're myths. And I'll be happy when we put these myths to bed. Now, here's another thing that could be considered a myth that should also be put to bed. And it has to do with what I just talked about Russian interference. Now, this is coming from an article by Matt Margolis. Excuse me, frog in my throat. By Matt Margolis at PJ Media. And in this article, Matt Margolis points out that that the allegations that Russia interfered in the 2016 election are false. And he backs it up by saying, hey, read the Mueller report. It's the Mueller report that debunked Russians being involved, and certainly being involved with Trump, or Trump-Russia collusion, being involved with anyone in the Trump campaign. But you can go look at the ICA as well, which is why Durham and Nunez and a lot of people now are looking at the intelligence community assessment ordered by Barack Hussein Obama. Because the ICA basically is what gave them permission to launch the coup, appoint Uncle Bob the Executioner, and all the rest. Get 2 more FISA warrants on Page, launch the frame-ups on Papadopoulos, and the whole 9 yards. And the ICA basically says that that there was some evidence that people in the Trump team may have been working with Russia to interfere in the 2016 election. That the Russians were involved to help the Trump campaign, and that there may be people within the Trump orbit who may be involved. And of course, this is why Durham is so focused on it. And of course, all this is a myth too. There was no Trump-Russia collusion. Nobody in the Trump campaign was working with Russia, and there was no Russian interference in the election. So these are myths, and I'll be very happy when they are put to rest, because I just get tired of hearing it. Even on Fox, Sean Hannity continues to call it the Steele dossier. We should never again use the phrase Steele dossier, Russian collusion, or Russian interference in the 2016 election. It was the Clinton campaign, the Federal Bureau of I'm With Her, the CIA, and all their friends. They were the ones that were meddling, interfering in the 2016 election, along with their allies in the corporate media. That's where the collusion was. I certainly hope that when Durham finishes his investigation, it is important that we prosecute all the criminals, all of them. But it's also important at the end of the day, when this is all said and done and the smoke is cleared, that it is crystal clear in the minds of everyone that these myths be destroyed and that everyone knows there was no Steele dossier, no Trump-Russia collusion, and no Russians meddling in the election. Those three things need to be clearly understood because people continue to, like I said, even Hannity pushes these things, despite the evidence proving otherwise. And people he said on his show. He said Lee Smith on his show. Lee Smith sat right there and told Hannity about the proto-dossiers. Devin Nunez has told Hannity he doesn't think there was any Russians. So people get locked into these talking points and they just can't get off of them. It drives you nuts. That's why I really can't watch Hannity, to be honest with you. Now, let's focus a little bit again on Jimmy the Weasel Comey. And I don't know how many counts of perjury that he's going to be charged with, but I'm losing count. I used to try to keep count. I know he lied 4 times to Congress, but the amount of lies, every time you turn around and see another document release and you look at some statement that Comey or Clapper or Brennan made, you find that they're lying about everything. Everything that came out of their mouths was a lie. Comey's entire Q&A with the Congress, when he was under oath testifying in front of Congress, his entire testimony was a lie. So when Durham prosecutes Comey, it's going to be he'll have many different charges, I'm sure, but when he gets to the perjury charge, I don't know how many counts of perjury it's going to be, but it could be hundreds. Perjured himself hundreds of times. Let's take a look at a couple of examples that we can now nail down what we know Comey was lying. Big lies. These are not little lies. These are big fat lies. So Comey swore to Congress in the hearings that the FBI counterintelligence operations on the 4 primary people in the Trump campaign, Manafort, Flynn, Papadopoulos, and Page, that these people were being investigated because of potential ties to Russia, but that they weren't. But that the FBI didn't have an investigation into the Trump campaign. No. It wasn't an investigation of the Trump campaign. It was an investigation into 4 people who just happened to be in the Trump campaign. And that's how Comey weasels that around. He says, no, we weren't investigating the Trump campaign. We were investigating these 4 individuals, and just purely by pure coincidence, these 4 individuals just happened to be working for the Trump campaign. Despite the fact that Papadopoulos didn't know any Russians, doesn't speak Russian, never been to Russia, has no affiliation with Russians whatsoever. Carter Page, on the other hand, it was his damn job. He was an energy consultant, working for a major bank, dealing with, Russian energy companies. Of course, he talked and met with Russians in the energy business, not in the intelligence business. And nothing he was doing had anything to do with politics. Carter Page was an oil energy consultant, and he worked with a lot of people in the energy. And if you're in where he was in Europe, the Russians provide about 70% of the oil and natural gas in Europe. They're a major player. Obviously, he's going to come in contact with Russians, but they knew at the time that Carter Page was working as an FBI and CIA informant, and it just helped the FBI less than a year earlier, months earlier, to take down a Russian organized crime ring in the U.S. And then, of course, we have Manafort. Manafort was just a lobbyist. Worked for anybody. The Podestas were working for the exact same client. They didn't get FISAs on them. None of these people. None of these people. I mean, what, the FBI is going to investigate anyone who's ever met or talked to a Russian or been to Russia? Because that's a hell of a lot of people. But they just coincidentally happen to be the 4 people they decided to look at in this matter, happen to be working for the Trump campaign. That's what Comey wants you to believe. It's a lie. And everyone knows it's a lie. Trump, all you have to do is read the text, read the emails, and eventually, we don't know this, but Durham by now probably does, and he learned it probably from Mike Rogers. The fact is, they were using all these people to get to Trump. And when we find out who all those 702 queries were on, and we find out who they were unmasking and who they were listening to, that's when we'll truly know for sure, 100% for sure, that it definitely was an investigation into the Trump campaign and not just 4 individuals who just happened to cross paths with the Trump campaign who had connections to Russians. Comey also says that the investigations were opened at the end of July. Big, fat lie. Way big, fat lie there. We just learned from the recent document dumps that Steele had an FBI informant in June of 2016. And of course we know about all the activities of the spies working on Papadopoulos and Carter Page and all the activities that were going on in Ukraine around Manafort. All this stuff was happening long before July 31st of 2016. Lies, lies, lies. Big, big, fat lies by Jimmy the Weasel. Comey says that they opened the investigation on Papadopoulos, Page, Flynn, and Manafort because of their pre-existing Russia ties. His words. He said they opened the investigations on Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort because of their previously existing Russia ties. And that they just happened to be working in the Trump campaign. It's not going to fly with John Durham, I can assure you of that. And now that we have overwhelming evidence, again, how many counts of perjury do you think Comey's looking at? Man, oh man, I've lost track. It's got to be into the multiple dozens of lies from Comey. These are under oath. This is when he was testifying in front of Congress. So he can't say, well, that's a lie, but I was doing a media appearance. Oh, that's a lie, but I was on CNN. Or I can lie to CNN. I can lie to ABC. I can lie one of my speeches on my book tour. I can even lie in my book. That's not a crime. Well, he's right. But you can't lie when you're under oath to Congress, and you certainly can't lie to John Durham. But I'm sure he'll try. So yes, just more damaging evidence against Jimmy the Weasel Comey. Again, I don't know how many counts of perjury he's looking at, but it's got to be in the dozens and dozens. Not to mention all the other crimes, abuse of power, deprivation of civil liberties, to all of these people who were spied on. Comey's looking at a lot of charges, quite honestly. The rest of his life in prison, probably. Now, let's move on to the next thing. I'm running out of time. I could go on for hours on this topic. Okay, so yesterday I was talking about the bug-eyed fool, Adam Schiff, and why he should be looked at for criminal charges. Because, of course, we know that Devin Nunez did his FISA report on the problems with the Carter Page FISA. Puts out his report, and then the bug-eyed fool follows up with his own report with Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee. And in that report, they just flat out lie. They try to debunk Nunez's report, which turned out to be perfectly accurate, and they put out their own report, which appears to be complete lies. They had access to the same intel Nunez did. Yet Schiff's report completely tries to debunk Nunez's report, and it uses lies to do it. Now, he's the head of the Intelligence Committee. That is a legal document that he put out this report. And if it can be proved that he knowingly lied putting out that report, that is a crime. And we know that he knowingly lied. He had the same information Nunez had. He knew about all the abuses that went on and all the irregularities and all the things that were wrong, all the exculpatory information. He read the Papagalopoulos transcripts. He knew it was all bullshit. Yet he put out the report trying to debunk Nunez's report and promoting these lies, which are now in an official document held within the U.S. government. He knowingly lied and produced a report paid for by the taxpayers and put it into the system where it is now, and it's lies, and he knew it. I'm sure that's a crime. But while we're waiting for someone to look at that crime, and I'm not so sure Durham isn't looking into some of these people, him and Warner and a few others, Feinstein. We do know for a fact that Schiff is the target of another criminal investigation, and that's by the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. So now Schiff is under investigation by the FCC for asking these big telecom companies to provide him with phone records. And he got phone records of, we know for sure, Giuliani and Nunez and others. And he, in doing so, violated privacy laws, as did the telecom companies that gave him what he requested, which is over 4,000 pages of phone records. 4,000 pages of phone records they turned over to Schiff. So now the FCC is looking at up to $200 million in fines to be levied against these telecom companies for providing Schiff with this information, which violated privacy laws, which means that Schiff violated privacy laws. So the bug-eyed fool's currently under investigation, as are the telecom companies over that little scandal there, where he subpoenaed all these phone records. So yes, the bug-eyed fool is currently under investigation by the FCC. We'll see what happens there. And we learned yesterday that the bug-eyed fool, along with the penguin, Jerry Nadler, are now demanding an investigation into Attorney General Barr's comments over the Trump firing of Michael Atkinson, the deep state insider from the Inspector General. He was the Inspector General of the intelligence community, and he was involved deeply in the Ukraine plot. He was involved back in 2016. He was one of the senior legal people at the DOJ NSD that signed off on FISA warrants, that signed off on or approved them through the legal department. He also was aware of the 702 queries and all that kind of stuff. He's up to his eyeballs in a lot of the crimes. Now, Nadler and Schiff actually want the Inspector General to launch an investigation into Barr for comments. For comments that he made about Atkinson and Trump firing him. You got to be kidding me. Well, here's the thing. Here's what Barr said. He said that the firing was justified because Atkinson broke protocol in a big way. As Inspector General of the intelligence community, his job is oversight of the people who work in the intelligence community. That could be CIA, NSA, whatever. Not the President of the United States. The President of the United States is not an employee of the CIA or the NSA or anything else. He's the chief executive of the damn government. It was not within Atkinson's purview to look at anything having to do with the president. Not only that, he made Barr list about a half a dozen procedural errors that he made, such as he didn't even read the damn transcript of the phone call. He arranged for a document to be changed so it would allow the whistleblower to make a complaint. He allowed the whistleblower to make a correction in the complaint. All sorts of things that were violations of protocol. But the main one being that he had no jurisdiction. He's not the Inspector General over the president. He's the Inspector General over the intelligence community. He did not have the authority And he was told that by the Department of Justice. And he went ahead and did it anyway. He had every reason to be fired. He should have been fired a long time ago for other things. Yeah, let the Inspector General go ahead and look into that and see what he finds. I got a better idea. For the bug-eyed fool. Why don't you release the transcript of Atkinson's testimony from your little impeachment coup? You released all the other testimonies, but you won't release Atkinson's. You know what I think Barr ought to do, if he can do it, is Barr ought to order the release of Atkinson's testimony to Schiff's committee. That would shut the bug-eyed fool up in a hurry. Trey Gowdy was on Maria Bartiromo's show a long time ago, probably 6 months ago now. It's been a while. And he told her that there is an email chain. That there's an email chain which he has read. So has Ratcliffe. And that email chain, as Gowdy explains it in a kind of a covert way, in that email chain, it's Mr. Potato Head John Brennan, who is insisting that the dossier material be included in the ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment. Now, of course, as we know, Brennan has stated that it did not play any role in the ICA. Now, this particular email chain, what's interesting about it is it looks like there's a game going on between Comey and Brennan, because Comey is sending out this email to his subordinates, which would be McCabe, Strzok, and others. Brennan's not included in this email chain, nor is anyone at the CIA or ODNI. It's the Crossfire Hurricane FBI team. Comey sends this email out, goes to this email chain, telling them that it's Brennan, Mr. Potato Head, who wants to include the dossier information into the ICA. So it looks like Comey is trying to get cover. It's like he wants the information from the dossier in there, but he doesn't want to have to take responsibility. So he's telling his subordinates in Operation Crossfire Hurricane team at the FBI, well, you know, this dossier information, Mr. Potato Head, Brennan, he wants it in the ICA, as if Comey saying that he doesn't. But we know that they both did want the dossier in the ICA, or it wouldn't have been there. So it's just interesting that email chain is there. Trey Gowdy's read it. So has Ratcliffe. And this is why it's so extraordinary that Brennan would say that he never saw the dossier until December of 2016, and that it had no part to play in the Intelligence Community Assessment. I mean, he's burned. He's burned hard there. That's why Durham's looking so hard at the ICA and Brennan. And we also know that when Brennan contacted Harry Reid and motivated him to write a letter to Comey to tell Comey to investigate Trump-Russia collusion, it was based on dossier information. And what's more, we now know that the FBI was aware of the fact that John Brennan contacted Harry Reid and said, hey, and I assume it's because Harry Reid probably told Comey. He's probably, yeah, I just got off the phone with Brennan. And Brennan told me that you should look into the, Trump-Russia collusion. So Brennan tries to play it off and use Harry Reid to be another person to push the dossier, and Brennan's not aware. Now, maybe he told Harry Reid not to say anything, and maybe Harry Reid didn't say anything. Maybe the FBI found that some other way. But we do know for a fact that the FBI knew shortly after Harry Reid contacted Comey and said, hey, you need to look into this Trump-Russia collusion, blah, 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 blah. Shortly after that, the FBI knew that it was Brennan who provided that information to Harry Reid. And, of course, that was long before December 2016. This is another reason why Brennan is also going to be charged with perjury. Now, we haven't talked very much about this in the last couple of weeks or anything, but with all that we've had that's come out since the IG report coming out, late October, early November, IG report comes out, blows up the Trump-Russia collusion, points out all the problems, his IG report on the FISA, on top of what Nunez already told us, on top of all the other things that have come out, the declassifications, all that's come out, and you'll be hard-pressed to find any major media outlet, any of the networks, MSNBC, CNN, to come out and report on any of it. Yet for the entire 2.5 years that the Mueller investigation was going on, and even prior to that, it was Trump-Russia collusion, Russia meddling in the election, every single day. 24 hours a day on CNN and MSNBC. It was being covered by ABC, CBS, NBC. It was being wrote about every day in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Beast, the Guardian. You go right on down the line. It was 100% massive media assault on the Trump-Russia collusion hoax for 2.5 years. But now that all of this information has come out, this debunked the entire damn thing, you will be hard-pressed to find any story from the corporate media, the cable media, the print media, covering any of this, debunking all the bullshit that they pushed for 2.5 years. We have the former Prime Minister of Australia, Malcolm Turnbull. He says that Alexander Down the Hatch Downer did not have the Australian government's authority to contact Papadopoulos and question him about the Trump campaign connections to Russia, or to raise his concerns with the U.S. Embassy in London. And Turnbull says that the Australian government did not even know about any of this until the feds came a-knocking. Looks like they're throwing Alexander Down the Hatch Downer under the bus. Now, in Graham's letter, which you can read from the recently declassified documents, I read it, you should read it, Graham says in no uncertain terms, he doesn't mince any words, we know that Downer was told to meet with Papadopoulos. Okay? This bullshit about he was responding to an article in the newspaper that Papadopoulos wrote is bullshit. Downer was told by somebody to meet with Papadopoulos. And that's, Durham probably already knows who that was. I suspect it was Halper or Priestap. Or directly the Reverend Clinton. Remember, Hakluyt has offices in 5 major cities, not just in London, but also in New York and Tokyo. Then, of course, we have Nunez on the John Batchelor show doubling down. And he says that the trail of misconduct leads in the FBI leads directly to Comey, McCabe, and Priestap. And he says right now that his committee is laser focused on what information the CIA gave the FBI in the summer of 2016. Oh, we know. It was the dossier information that Brennan says he didn't have until December. These people are going down, and they're going down hard. A lot of lies, a lot of perjury, a lot of shenanigans. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. You guys be safe and stay healthy. See you. Bye.